Yesterday, President Trump issued an executive order. He imposed a hiring freeze on the federal workforce. It was not only a freeze, but an attack on those serving our country and a misguided action that will achieve the opposite of what is intended. Now, for those who are listening in the chamber, Mr. Speaker, let me say that I'm proud to represent 62,000 federal employees. Hopefully, all of us refer to them as working people. We all say we want to be supportive of working people. Some people, however, in this body and down the avenue exempt federal employees as working people. They are not only working people, but they are working for the American people. Let's not forget that 2/3 of federal employees live and work outside the greater Washington area. Very nice to say all those bureaucrats in Washington, but 2/3 of our federal employees serve in every community around our country. Serving and protecting them, FBI agents, agents around the world who work for the Central Intelligence Agency, 117 of whom who died in service and spoke in front of their memorial the other day. Employees of the Centers for Disease Control, keeping us healthy as communities and as a country, protecting our children and our families from diseases that would attack us. Federal employees at the National Institutes of Health studying how we prevent and cure cancer, heart disease, lung disease, diabetes, autism, other afflictions that confront our country, both health care from a physical and mental standpoint. And yes, nurses at our veterans' hospitals. A freeze so that if a nurse leaves, you can't replace her or him. A doctor at a veterans hospital leaves, you can't replace that doctor, apparently. Even at the IRS, where we talk about making sure our tax system is fair and making sure that everybody pays their fair share, we undermine the ability to make that a reality. Our Border Patrol to keep our borders safe. Homeland Security to keep our homeland safe. They serve the public in every state and every congressional district in the country. This hiring freeze will not save us money or do anything to make the government more efficient. Should we do both? Yes. Will this policy do it? No. Its effect will be a reduction in the level of service benefiting the American people. Greater difficulty in recruiting and retaining the most talented Americans to public service, and increased costs as a result of having to hire more expensive private contractors for work that still needs to be done. That's something that the public doesn't understand. That, frankly, we exploded in the early part of this century, the contracting out, which gave us less control and more cost. It's more expensive to contract out. Already, our federal employees have made significant sacrifices toward achieving a greater fiscal sustainability in this country. Now, let me give you the magnitude of that. Federal employees over the last 10 years have given up $159 billion in pay and benefits to which they would otherwise have been entitled, but we withdrew those resources from them. Instead of continuing to vilify federal civilian employees, as they have done for years, and when I say they, the politicians have done it, mostly on the Republican side of the aisle, but perhaps not exclusively, vilified our federal employees. Republicans in Congress and in the White House ought to be thanking them for their hard work. I can't imagine any of us would treat our own employees, Mr. Speaker, in a fashion that said we're going to lay you off, we're going to undercut your pay, we're not going to give you the benefits which we promised you, and think that they were going to keep personnel on board with high morale and highly motivated to do the job, not only for us members, but for the American people. No employer would think that they can mistreat their employees and expect the highest performance out of them. And certainly no employer would think that if I treat my employees the way we've been treating federal employees, that we could recruit and retain the best and the brightest to serve the country. Mr. Speaker, I urge the President rescind his order. That is not to say that their executives in all of these agencies should not look at making sure that we have the proper number of employees on board and are acting efficiently and effectively and working hard to accomplish the objectives that we as a Congress, on behalf of the American people, have given them. That's the issue. I urge my Republican friends in this House and in the Senate to speak out against it. And I urge all federal employees and their families to speak up in their communities across our country to remind their fellow Americans of the important work they do and why this hiring freeze would be so harmful to our country. Giving one another respect in America is not political correctness. It is the way we ought to treat one another. And we ought to treat our public employees who work for us and our country with the same kind of respect that we would want for ourselves. Frankly, respect of one another was a victim in this last campaign, but it should not be and must not be the norm. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields.